Alright folks, so little bit difficult here to get this whole thing on the table here. What I've done, I'm using model plane foam grade B, as I mentioned in my intro, to build my plane. So what I've done is I've just kind of laid out the pieces the best I could to economize foam without wasting a whole lot. And then what I've done is I've essentially with black marker on in a couple areas here, I've just roughly drawn a line, here in two places. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take all the pieces off. They're not glued down. I just kind of place them, and then I'm going to cut the foam roughly along this line. Then essentially what that'll do is it'll allow me to have sort of two smaller pieces of foam to work with here in my smaller work area. Obviously, if you have a bigger workbench and space is not a problem, then you can just leave it on the one piece of foam. Or if you're using Dollar Tree foam or some other types of foam, obviously your layout's going to be a little bit different. This is just sort of what's worked for me. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to pause again, and then I'm going to cut my sheet of foam into the two smaller, more usable pieces, and then we'll get to putting the actual plans down on the foam and start cutting. Okay, so be right back with you. Alright folks, so I've got my foam cut into two more manageable pieces. This model plane foam grade B has sort of a very smooth side, a smooth side, and then sort of a rough side. I normally like to put my plans down on the smooth side. That's probably that's essentially going to end up being the sort of the top of my airplane, and then I leave the rougher stuff on the bottom. Okay, so I'm going to start. I normally like to start with the bigger pieces, and what I like to use, this is called Elmer's Craft Bond spray adhesive. You can get it. I buy it at Walmart, Michael's, pretty much any craft store. I'm not sure if you can get it at hardware stores, but anyway, it essentially sticks the plans down onto the foam, but then as long as you don't put it on too heavy, then you can peel the paper off after you've cut the foam out. I know that there's other ways of doing it. If you don't have this, or you want to save a little money, this is, I don't know, $9 or $10 a can, although you can build a lot of planes out of it, believe me, is, you can also tape the edges, or I know people even pin it, but you want to make sure that if you do that, you try and have the paper as absolutely as flat as possible. Okay, so I'm just going to demonstrate how I use this with one piece. Now, you want to give it a good shake. Now, I do it actually just on top of the foam. I don't do it right on my table, because then my table ends up getting gummy, and I can end up gluing stuff, to the table, which I don't want to do. I just noticed a spot here. I should probably tape here on the bottom, just so this flap doesn't cause me any issues. Okay, so I'm just going to spray a very, very fine mist. Again, it's one of these things where you want to put a little bit less than when you think you need. It's always easier to go back and put a little extra afterwards, rather than putting too much, because then it becomes difficult. So it tacks up pretty quick. So some of these odd shaped pieces are a little bit more of a handful, but we're going to kind of start laying it down along the edge here, the edge of the foam. Okay. There we go. Now we're starting to get it. Okay, and then you just kind of, I just use my hand, give it a good smoothing with my hand. Take as many of the wrinkles and everything out. Okay, there we go. All right, so then you just carry on. Now that you've already sort of dry fit everything where it's going to kind of go, then we just continue on and glue the other pieces down. So I'm just going to pause again now. I'll put all my pieces on this piece of foam, and then I'll use this to demonstrate how I like to start cutting the foam. Alright, so be right back. Alright folks, so I've got the parts on sort of the largest part anyway on the one big piece of foam, and then I've cut that down into two pieces of foam again, just to make it easier to handle and hopefully a little bit easier to demonstrate. Now I'm not going to put you through the through the torture of watching me cut out every part, but I'm just going to kind of demonstrate here. You know, we've got a couple of fairly simple parts with the these are sort of the inside part of the nacelles that are going to go on the bottom of the plane, and then of course our the bottom part of our wing, or the back half of our wing and the back plate and all that sort of stuff. So I've put a nice fresh blade, nice brand new blade in my knife here, and just going to kind of give you a bit of a demonstration on how I like to cut the foam. Now, depending on the foam that you're using, Dollar Tree foam, which has paper on both sides, you know, the paper can really dull the blades quickly. Model plane foam, I find, dulls the blades a little bit more quickly than maybe Depron does. So that's something that you got to be cautious of. You know, if you start to feel that your blade is really pulling or it's catching in the foam, then either you're trying to cut too much at once or your blade is starting to get dull. So you know, you want to just either slow down, see if that improves, fixes the problem, or maybe it's time to put a new blade in. What you don't want to end up having is that, you know, all along the edges or of your plane is that, you know, you're tearing the foam, and then it looks quite rough. So normally the easiest way to do it is, you know, just sort of start on the line where you're going to cut, and then just sort of gently, you know, almost score it, maybe about halfway through. Not a whole lot of pressure here, just there we go. And then, you know, depending on how the foam is or how it feels, you can either finish cutting it all the way through, which is easy to do when the blade is nice and sharp, or again, just, you know, score it again, and then you're you know, you're good to go. So I'm just going to show you how I'm going to cut out. I'll just cut out this little inside nacelle piece here. So again, just start on the line. And you can tell when you're sort of all the way through the foam. So I'll normally cut all the lines that go in one direction first. Sorry about the phone. I'm not gonna answer that right now. If it's important, they'll call back. Okay. There we go. So I've cut the lines, cut all the way through on the lines sort of going one way, and then just cut the lines going the other way, like so. Okay. And then just, you know, just gently when you go to start popping it out, just be gentle in case there's a little spot that you've missed. Okay, that came out nice and clean, and I missed the one line going right here. So we'll just cut that off nice and clean. All right. Now some of these bigger pieces of foam like this, just hang on to these, and we're going to cut these into smaller pieces for later on in the build. They're great for you know, squeegeeing away extra glue, that sort of stuff. So if you've got anything sort of this size, just kind of hang on to it, put it off to the side. So there we go. And then all you do, if you've used the glue thing, is you just kind of gently peel. You know, it helps if you sort of start at a corner, and then just kind of gently peel the paper off, and there you go, you're done. Okay, so I'm just going to demonstrate here real quickly on how I like to cut these slots. Now, you're better off to cut the slot a little bit smaller, because you can always squeeze the foam a little bit for the tab that goes in. So I like to sort of cut either right on the line or just slightly inside the line. And again, using the same technique, just gentle scoring, until you feel like you're all the way through. Alright, so I've done that. And then just very gently going this way so you don't cut too much foam. Again, just kind of put your knife, tip your knife down in there until you feel like you've gone all the way through, and then again, just gently, there we go, pop that out, nice and clean. And then, if you've got any little bit of extra scraggle there, you can always take it off. But now it's nice and clean, so that when you go to put the tab that fits in there, it should fit in there nice and snug. Okay, so hopefully that demonstrates how we go about doing this. So I'm just going to continue now and finish cutting out all the rest of my my pieces of my plane, and then we'll get down to putting the bad boy together. All right, folks. So oh, I should point out this, just a couple of things here I didn't mention earlier, which I'll mention now. If you decide to get your plans printed, the untiled version of the plans. This is obviously the untiled version printed off on 8.5 by 11. When you get it taken to a print shop or send it to a print shop, it'll get printed off in a much bigger piece of paper. So you don't have to go through the same sort of steps as we did. Your front part of your wing plate's all going to come out in one piece anyway, and then you can do the same thing as we did with the back plate and the elevons if you want to build it this way. The other thing is that all your pieces here, they're not mirrored, so you can just pop those together without having to do all that funky stuff that we did with the mirrored parts in order to get the pieces that we have right now. Okay, so there we go. So I'm going to finish, like I said, I'll finish cutting all of my parts out, and then we'll be back and start actually assembling it. Okay, so I'll be right back with you. Hi folks, one very crucial thing that I forgot to mention before, when you cut your parts out, especially this is the the vertical part of the nose and the fuselage, here's where your CG is marked, or your center of gravity. So before you take the paper off, very important, I just like to take a pin and I push it right through the very center. You've got sort of a little cross or a plus sign. I push it all the way through the foam like that. And then actually what I do is I'll just kind of twist it around, kind of just to make a good size hole there. All right, so I've done that, and then when I peel the paper off, whoop, now I've got a hole in my foam there. And if you want to mark it with a marker or whatever, but that's where the CG, the balance point, is going to be. So very, very important to mark that before you pull the paper off of this piece. Okay. The other thing, in many ParkJet plans, a dash line means that it's actually a score line. This is actually going to be a hinge. This is sort of your bottom, the bottom plate, but this is actually hinged, so you can get in and get your battery sorted out. So this part is going to be fixed to the plane, and then we're going to make a tape hinge. So you can actually cut that where the dash line is. You can just actually cut that all the way through, and then we're actually going to hinge that with some tape later. Okay, so that dash line there, you can just cut that right through. And again, very important, make sure before you pull the paper off of this particular piece that you poke a hole or make some sort of mark through the foam so that you can very easily find where the center of gravity is for later on in the build. All right, so I'm going to get back cracking here to cut out the last couple pieces of foam for my plane, and then we'll be ready to start putting it together. All right.